Hello everybody and welcome back to another exciting edition of Chromatographic, the show in which I, Matt, the Game Boy, will take you through the highs and lows of the Game Boy Color library, one cart at a time. This week we're in for a bit of a treat with Alice in Wonderland. Just like the rest of the internet, I recently found myself trying to play through the Kingdom Hearts games in an effort to jog my brain on the events I experienced over 15 years ago, as well as cramming in the various spin-offs I bought and never got around to playing. While trying to remember who got naughted and the pains of trying to spec as a Magic user, it was the splashes of Disney that lifted my spirits between the seriousness of the story and, well, I just fell down a rabbit hole of playing classic Disney licensed games instead. Sorry Kingdom Hearts 3, I guess for now you're demoted to the pile of shame with Dream Drop Distance and Recoded. But while most believe the world of licensed video games is full of duds, it's usually the Disney games of the early 90s that stand toe-to-toe with the original IP platformers of the day. Now, I know the Game Boy Color has some terrible licensed titles, but honestly, for each of the games on the system with questionable quality, there are some real standout games that are completely overlooked. However, it must be said that most of the standout licensed games are based on Disney properties. There is, of course, a reason for this. As one of his last acts before leaving the company, head of Nintendo of America Howard Lincoln struck a deal with Disney Interactive for Nintendo of America to publish 13 titles based on Disney licenses for the N64 and Game Boy Color. Oddly, this happened in 1999, the year Disney Interactive signed deals with both Activision and Ubisoft as well, resulting in a lot of Disney games hitting the market in a relatively short space of time. Nintendo left the development of their Game Boy Color games in the hands of Rareware for the Mickey Racing titles, and Left Field Productions for their games based off of Disney Princess licenses, namely the Beauty and the Beast, a board game adventure, and The Little Mermaid 2 Pinball Frenzy. However, it seems that there was another game in development at this time based on Disney's Alice in Wonderland. I presumed this Black Cat version was being made by Left Field Productions, making some sense for their mysterious inclusion on the Wikipedia of the game we're going to talk about today. However, that doesn't seem to be the case. I'll keep chasing it down to find out who it was, but for the time being, that remains a mystery. This first attempt at an Alice game, however, unfortunately didn't meet Nintendo's quality standards and was scrapped. Enter Digital Eclipse. Impressed with the quality of their Tarzan title, Nintendo and Disney Interactive approached the company in an attempt to create an Alice in Wonderland game as colourful and animated as their works for Activision. Digital Eclipse themselves chose to make a more complex game than the standard platformer, and Nintendo was only happy to oblige them, pushing the studio and in turn the Game Boy Color to its limits over the game's 8 to 10 month development cycle. The game follows the story of the 1951 animated classic, embellishing the story here and there for gameplay purposes, but it hits the main beat still. Alice, out in the fields, bored while her sister reads, sees a white rabbit who leads her through a small door and tumbling down into Wonderland. While the game is primarily a platformer, there are interludes in the gameplay that mix up the formula a little. From auto-scrolling sections like Alice sailing in a bottle down the Sea of Tears, or playing croquet with the Queen of Hearts. The game also draws on Alice's growing and shrinking from the movie for gameplay purposes. On hitting a mushroom, Alice will either grow or shrink in alternation, allowing the player to access areas inaccessible at other heights. Be warned though, the game doesn't really reward exploring at an alternate size, so if you see a mushroom, be sure you need to use it. The one hindrance beyond the jump height is that you can't jump on enemies' heads in this smaller state, potentially resulting in needless deaths due to you getting damaged a lot. Strangely, while the game offers Alice 5 pieces of health, counted by storybook pages rather than hearts, the game only grants the player 1 life, meaning if you die, you go back to the start of the level. It's not the worst fate imaginable as the levels are short, and the game does offer auto-saving in the beginning of each level, which is great. Also, the game has 3 save slots, so there's no worries about giving this to your kids and them erasing your save file. Surprisingly, midway through the game, upon arriving in Wonderland, the game actually moves beyond the traditional level-by-level formula and into an open world in which Alice must explore Wonderland, finding missing objects for familiar characters like the walrus, the Tweedles, and the caterpillar. Here, even the platforming levels themselves expanded to a more open structure beyond the generic, keep going right trappings that a lot of licensed platformers fall into. Some of these sections will even see you running around an open level from a top-down perspective, so the gameplay never really has a chance to get repetitive. That said, the game is not without its problems. Some sections of the platforming can get slightly frustrating due to some odd design choices. The first Cheshire Cat stage has seemingly endless platforms to climb up and a lot of obnoxious trapdoors to avoid. The River of Tears section can also be a little tricky to sail through without hitting an obstacle, and don't get me started on the section where you play as Bill the Lizard. That was the one point in the game where I almost turned it off. But if you can deal with the literal ups and downs of scaling a giant-sized Alice, the rest of the game is a bit of a cakewalk. There are a variety of hidden things to uncover in playing through the game also. Collecting 100 stars dotted around the level will see you unlock a race with the White Rabbit, that in turn unlocks secret levels for Alex to explore. There are also 8 teapots hidden around the game by the Cheshire Cat, but I'll be honest and admit to you, dear viewer, I couldn't find them all, so I have no idea what they uncover. The real draw in Alice, though, as I'm sure you have already noticed, is its incredible visuals. As is to be expected from the studio that brought Dragon's Lair to the system, the animation in Alice is incredibly fluid and colourful. The levels themselves, while some can look a little washed out because of the incredible levels of detail, are nonetheless an impressive feat. Then when you throw in little touches like Alice reflecting on various surfaces, some very impressive warping backgrounds, and some of the best parallax scrolling on the system, you can see why I want to bring this game to your attention. Beyond the main game itself, which can be played on easy or hard difficulty, there's an alternate mode called Where in Wonderland, where the player must explore an area of Wonderland playing a hot and cold style minigame in search of an object. Not my favourite game mode, but hey, I can't really knock an attempt to prolong the game's lifespan. Alice also has Game Boy printer support, allowing the player to customise and print out scenes and characters from the movie on a little thermal printer that could. This seemingly light feature set was a challenge for Digital Eclipse to develop, as Nintendo required strict safety measures for it to be implemented. The printer could, via the printing head, detect temperature, something Digital Eclipse needed to program into the game to warn the user if the printer was, say, on fire or in water. While I didn't test these things myself, I'm assured that many a Game Boy printer was killed in the name of development, as there was no manual to help program these kind of diagnostics into the game. And yet, in spite of this hard work, these features were stripped out of the European version, presumably to allow the sprites to be used for other language options. Aside from the historical significance of marking a starting point of a strong collaboration between Digital Eclipse and Nintendo, I think Alice in Wonderland is an overlooked title on the Game Boy Color worthy of your attention. Is it the best game on the system? Probably not, but it's still an enjoyable experience. However, if you're in search of some of the best looking and technically impressive visuals on the system, you need look no further. It's tonally spot on with the psychedelic feel of the source material and does things rarely seen before or since on the Game Boy Color. Just remember to begin at the beginning and go on until the end, then stop. That is, of course, if you want to. And that brings us to the end of another Chromatographic, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed. A huge thank you to Mike Mika and everyone else I talked to searching down the old version of the Alice game. As I said, if I uncover anything, Game Boys and Girls, I'll let you know. Until next week though, where I'll be back with a Game Boy classic, be sure to game on.